Mixed Media Gaming.
Welcome back to the Mixed Media Podcast, or I guess if you're watching live, you've always been here. But if you're watching post, welcome back. Currently, we have a interesting one. We have my first review, which is interesting. We've had quite a few reviews before, or not review. I'm gonna say interview. My bad. We had quite a bit of interviews before, but never for the gaming side of things. So this is interesting. And the people we're reviewing are these two people we have here. We have Colin and Alden, who are part of the Catholic Game Review.
Team, yeah.
And I sort of doesn't maybe a general theme of like how things have changed throughout time in the games industry, but in terms of my questions, they're pretty scattered around and it's sort of everywhere. So it'll be a bit of everything. And I guess I'll get right into it. So first thing I want to ask is how do you guys meet each other? Because I figured my assumption was that you were both in the same school. I don't know why that was my assumption, but then you said you're in high school. One of you said Alden said he was in high school. Colin said he was in college, so I assume that's just not how that worked.
Yeah, so it's actually a bit of a funny story. So most of the people who do stuff for my site, I actually met through a different Discord, which we can maybe talk about that a bit later. But in Colin's and his brother's case, they actually found me through an ad that we were serving, which was funny because I didn't really know if people ever actually clicked on those things or if they did anything. But one day I was asking in the Discord if anyone had seen our ads, and I guess that's where Colin came from. We just have a little form on our site in the FAQ where you can send us an email, and Colin did that. I forget which game it was for.
At the time, I was writing on a obscure little indie game by the name of Maiden and Spell.
Okay, yeah, I remember that one. But yeah, so he did that. We got it published, and now I'd say you're probably one of the most active reviewers for our site. I know we've had some new people kind of pop up as of late with KMax, but I'd say you and your brother probably make a good, 30 to 40% of our reviews at the moment, I'd say. Definitely helping a lot.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes from my own personal conviction to have at least one thing written a month so that, I'm always doing my part. But yeah, as far as how I see our story, really, I actually found your website a little while before I sent it in because I went back and forth for a little while on whether or not I was actually going to do it. But then I just wrote the review, sent it in at the behest of my mother, who was really encouraging me at the time. And 1 year and 4 months later, here I am on a podcast. Thanks, Mom.
Nice. It's crazy how that worked out. So you mentioned that you were already writing the review. Is that were you publishing it on somewhere else, or was it just for yourself?
No, I spent like a month of prep trying to get my first draft ready to show because I was very thorough like that. But as it turns out, Alden is just very chill and is very willing to work with whatever you send him in. Not that you can just send him garbage and he'll publish it, of course.
Yeah.
But he's very good at cooperating with the writers.
And just for some context, the way I set the rules out, people actually have to send us like a sample of what they're going to review, because I've gotten a decent amount of people who said that they wanted to write for our site and then they just didn't, contact us after the moment. So I don't really want to have people joining the Discord without really being able to offer anything. So it's kind of just a way to make sure that everyone who wants to help out the site is really serious about what they're doing, and just keeps out some bloat from random people joining, because I share a lot of stuff in our Discord, so I try to keep it pretty tight.
Gotcha. So how many people would you say are active team members at this moment?
I would say about 10. We have 2 that are priests, and they don't write anything. They'll just give comments on reviews every once in a while. We have a few that are kind of just busy with their own stuff. One of them actually has written a couple books and has his own website and does articles for other websites as well. So he doesn't do a bunch of stuff for our site because he's pretty busy. But yeah, I'd say about around like 10 in total. And then of course we have social media manager as well. I help with a bit of that, but we have a guy who helps with the Instagram and makes these special weekly posts that aren't reviews, but just try to relate, something from a game to some sort of Catholic Christian teaching. And yeah,
it's not any sort of small like operation here. This is like properly organized, which is really cool. I wasn't sure if like it was more like a very like ragtag group of people who are just sort of like without much of a plan. But you guys seem pretty well organized, which is pretty cool.
I would say that it probably did start out like that. I think it was really just me and Kairos, who's our web guy. I honestly actually came up with the site just because I was checking out how much it would cost for domain names on GoDaddy, and I saw that Catholic Game Reviews was like $12, and I thought that was a steal. I was surprised it wasn't taken, so I took it. And then I'm like, hey, does anyone want to try doing these things for this site? Because I've experimented in the past with YouTube and other social media sort of things, and it kind of just happened. I don't know, like it really wasn't planned. I was just bored during the summer of 2020. I wasn't even in online school, so I had a lot of free time, yeah. But now it's grown into like a bit of a bigger thing. And
yeah, so with that, growing into something that you didn't really expect it to be, do you have like what are your future plans? Is it like, do you want to sort of keep it sort of a similar like state as it is now? Do you have like aspirations to grow? Do you want to like monetize it like commercially, or?
So we do run just a couple of ads on our site. It doesn't really make us much at all, but it's just nice to have those there, to have at least some sort of passive income coming. We do have aspirations to grow. It was just this past August that I started pushing our team to do one review a week, and since then we've seen ourselves get significantly bigger over time. I think we're around like 1,400 views every like 28 days. I just had my Google Analytics up here, but that was definitely much more than we were getting at this time last year. We are hoping to expand a bit more into our YouTube side of things. That just takes a long time, and as far as I know, I'm the only one on the team that really has experience with any video editing. But I'm busy with a lot of the other things that we do for the site. So we're hoping, at least in the future, once we get enough people to expand a bit into YouTube. And also we have a goal to do some collabs with other people on the internet scene, which actually worked out really well when you guys contacted us, because we were not expecting that. So kind of helping meet one of our goals here for the year. Thank you guys for that.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention before I get onto like the game reviews and stuff like that. You mentioned Google Analytics. I know before we started the show, you're talking about trying to sort of separate yourself from Google and stuff like that. And that's something I definitely feel as someone who's I have a Google Analytics account myself for a website that I'll be launching relatively soon-ish, maybe. I don't know, we'll see. And so I definitely feel where you're coming from there. Yeah. What is your experience with that? Like, what are you trying to avoid? With sort of the products you use and stuff like that to help your website grow, and
Yeah, so I've always wanted to make a site that really anyone can go on, that parents could just like hand their phone to their kids and wouldn't feel bad about them surfing around on it, because even on sites like YouTube, they can be a bit iffy with the quality of their ads, and I've gotten served some stuff that's like really just out there and should not have been allowed. And just in general, I know you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket with a single company. I think it was the creator of Terraria. Like he had all his stuff on Google. He had everything in his Drive and his Gmail. And at one point, Google just like shut out his account, and he just lost access to everything. He could not get it back, and it was awful. So I'm really trying to stay away from, just putting everything into one company and sticking it like that. And then, of course, I want to respect people's privacy as well. I'm a guy, like, I don't use Chrome. I use a browser that, tries to block all the cookies and stuff. And I was trying to go without Google Analytics for like the first year, but my friend told me, like, you kind of got to do it. No way around it. And I think the amount of cookies on our site across like all the pages went up from like 12 in total to like over 100 just after putting Google on there. So guys, I promise we're not being creepy with your stuff, but yeah, Google can be a bit of a pain to deal with, just with the potential that it has and how far they reach in their in their services. It's definitely quite a big thing, and a big weight on my shoulders to deal with and be responsible for all of that.
Yeah, for real. I think the Terraria anecdote was a good one. I think for game developers especially, something I think about a lot is like, so I use a lot of Microsoft Suite products and stuff like that. I use like OneDrive extensively. I couldn't live without it pretty much, which is kind of concerning because there'll be a time where I might have to live without it. And that's something I've been like thinking about recently is like, how do I, not put all my eggs in one basket so that one day my game doesn't randomly get deleted, stuff like that, or plans and stuff like that. For example, I used to do all my show notes in OneNote. I now do them all in Notepad, and that is a mixture of not wanting to use everything for OneNote, and also like Notepad is underrated. It's just literally it's nice. It's a simple application. I don't need like formatting. I just
yeah.
I use dashes for bullet points. It works. And right now I'm reading off of OneNote, or not OneNote, Notepad. So it works.
Yeah. So Goatpad. That's funny. 909 crime. Yeah. No. Just from the angle of like faith. What sort of inspirations do you have? In creating the site. Yeah. Is this something that you see being a bigger part of your contribution to the economy of the kingdom, so to speak?
Yeah, so I guess a part of it is the ad provider that we do have, we've managed to stay away from Google so far. They're called Clean Media, and they serve ads that are basically either in line with the faith or indifferent to it. Pretty much helps us stay away from any inappropriate ads whatsoever. So you'll see a lot of ads that are just for like, beers made by monks, or like some new, I think the movie coming out.
Father Stew?
Yeah. Father Stew. He got some ads on our site. I saw those popping up.
Mark Wahlberg.
So yeah. So I know in that sense we've been able to at least divert our income to a place I really feel good about, and just kind of what's I don't know, right and just what's better for people to digest, because a lot of the stuff you see on the internet these days with ads, they're just getting worse and worse, and some really degenerate things that definitely from a faith perspective you're trying to stay away from as much as reasonably possible. And since we're not really trying to grow our site into like a huge business, I don't plan on it being my job ever, really. I don't mind taking a hit with revenue to just try and put in all of our money to what I think is better, because we also do our own ads through them. So I've been able to stay away from paying Google for stuff so far. But yeah,
on the same train of thought as that, one thing I want to ask is, so obviously the thing that separates you from the other reviewers is that you append Catholic to the beginning of your URL, right? So how does that affect how you review things? Do you review things from like a Catholic perspective, as in you're specifically bringing up certain topics and themes and stuff like that, or is it mostly around the same with some Catholic touches?
Yeah. All right, so I was going to say we can let Colin handle this one, but I did want to say really quick. Probably the biggest thing we do is just outline the type of content that's in the game, and just stuff that any Catholic or parent should know before playing it, so they can decide beforehand if it's a game that's good for them or not. Because a lot of games will kind of hide the stuff that they have underneath. But we do have another thing that we try to do where we touch on it from a faith perspective, and I think Colin can give some insight on this because he's probably the best one of our team when it comes to connecting games with parts from the faith. So,
that's very flattering of you, Alden. Thank you. So yeah, at first when I came to this site, all that year back ago, I actually didn't come at my games from much of a faith perspective at all. I was very concerned with being able to prove myself as someone who can analyze games competently. So a lot of my early reviews have that very rigid, stoic, trying to gauge the quality of the stuff in my games sort of tone to it. But there came to a point about halfway through 2021 where Alden really encouraged us to start looking at our games and trying to bring out a little bit more of that faith-based takeaways that we find in them. And from that point is when it was a little bit hard at first, don't get me wrong. But once it got there, I feel like that's when my reviews have really begun to hit their stride, because in addition to all of the juicy analytical stuff I do, I also get to really stop and think about what it is that I've just sat down and dedicated well over 20 hours of my life to playing, and what I can take back with that as a person of faith, and what I can share with that in other people. So in every review, you'll find one section that's just totally dedicated to this idea of what can we learn in some small way about our true lives from these little fictions that we entertain ourselves with. And this actually isn't a totally uncommon thing within Catholic culture already in other ways. For example, we have this way of reading the Bible called Lectio Divina, which is about slowly reading through a Bible passage and then reflecting very deeply in it about what God is trying to say to you through that. And I've heard like nuns on Twitter say that you can do the same thing with Cinema Divina, where you watch a film and think about what God might be able to say to you through that. And I think the exact same thing can apply to games. And I'm hoping I'm bringing a little bit of that in my reviews.
Nice. That's great to hear. So like, when you're reviewing a game, you mentioned some of that, almost like we were talking about, like looking at games through an analytical lens, almost like a objective way of thinking about it. Would you say that when you're reviewing games, there is like an objective way to look at it, or is it mostly subjective? It's like, how I feel about it, or is there a lot that's like, this is just how it is, or a mix between the two?
I think it comes out to a mix between the two. Now, trying to say about the objective thing is a very complicated thing to bring up, considering I'm in the middle of taking a philosophy of art and beauty class where objectivity of art is a very hot topic in our current classes right now. So when you say that, my mind just goes, oh boy, I got to explain all this, don't I? But yeah, I think you can certainly look at certain elements of games and think about whether or not there's something objectively good or bad about the way they're done. For example, you can certainly look at the art style of any given game and talk about whether it's clean and facilitates good play, or if it's very messy and makes playing it hard, and that sort of stuff. But on the whole, there is also a very significant amount of reviewer bias, to be sure. I jokingly like to say that the review scores we give to the games at the end of each article is literally just us deciding whether we want to put a little gold star next to it or not. And then the rest is just purely interpretation. Yeah, it's complicated, but there's a little bit of both, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds tough. I've done a few reviews for the podcast, and I always have some trouble with them in figuring out, like, is this something I should talk about? Is this just me? Is it like something that, like, isn't really an issue with the game. It's just me thinking about it. And certain things I'm like, yeah, I think this is like just objectively like a problem, or objectively good, So I would agree with that. Yeah, I think there are certain objective and subjective qualities to games. So I'm wondering, how do you manage like reviewing these games? Because at least for me, it feels like it takes a lot to like think about the game while you're playing it and still try to enjoy the game. Because I feel like if you're thinking about it too much, you might, in your own enjoyment by sort of slowing down too much, maybe slowing down slower than, the game developers intended you to slow down in a way. You're messing with the pacing sort of thing. And I think okay, here's an analogy. I think it's a similar experience, me reviewing games, to me reading books for high school, where I would have to take notes on the books and, so prepare for like a test or whatever. And I would always not want to read the book because I didn't want to take the notes. It wasn't that I didn't want to read the book. It's just like I didn't want to have to stop in the middle of the book I'm enjoying this book. I don't want to have to write something down. I'd rather just, internalize it in my brain and move on. So I'm wondering if you have similar experiences with games. Do you find it hard or maybe easy just to think about what you're reviewing? And do you even write things down while you're playing the game, or is it just something you write down after you've completed playing the game?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I tend to have a pretty sharp mental trap for just remembering certain experiences and stuff that happened to me throughout a game. I think the only time I ever took notes was when I was playing a game during last year, which ended on a cliffhanger. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to want to review this in tandem with the sequel to give a good idea of the story. So I wrote down my impressions and left it at that. That should be coming to fruition soon, by the way. But yeah, for the most part, the way I see it is if the game is putting your brain into big-time reviewer mode, that's more or less, I think, a valid part of one's own experience with a game. The less you feel like you're doing it to review it, the more likely it is that you're going to say nice things in the review because it was able to keep you entertained. And you'll remember the good parts more because you're not thinking so critically about it, I would say.
I see. I think one thing that like happens to me as I learn more and more about game dev is sort of like I start to go into that reviewer mode more often, or I guess my analyzing mode, as I sort of understand what I'm taking in, more and more. And I don't know if I feel like it's both good and bad. In one sense, I feel like sometimes I'm picking, like, obviously, like, I'm not enjoying certain games as much as I could be because some people just like look past the small like issues and they don't even think about it, right? For me, it's like, I don't know, I can't not look at that, the small issue. But on the other hand, I think when things go right and when game developers do things right, I sort of gain a greater appreciation for what they're doing. And as well, also, let's be learn from the game developers. Since it's something I want to do myself is make games and stuff like that. And so on the theme of reviewing games, I was wondering, both of you, what do you think about the sort of the quality of games as time progresses? I've seen on your website they've used games from all sorts of time periods, from modern to fairly older titles. I was wondering, do you see any sort of like quality trends? A lot of people say that new games are worse than older games, and there are some people who say the other way around. I don't really have an opinion on it. I talked about this before. I don't have an opinion on it because I haven't played a lot of older games. So, I can't judge things that I haven't, witnessed. I haven't even necessarily even watched playthroughs and stuff like that. So I was wondering what you guys thought about it.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot as of late, and I think one of the reasons why people like to say that older games are better than the newer ones is not only just because of the bias that everyone has right through those rose-tinted glasses for nostalgia and such, but also because now the game industry is bigger and works in ways that it didn't always. A lot of people like to point fingers at the mobile games and free-to-play market, which I definitely see where they're coming from on that front. I would say that you could probably say that mobile games are objectively worse than console games, but that's only because they're designed for different purposes, right? So mobile games we've seen, they pretty much have to be made for playing in really short bursts. And so like that's why you'll see in like Clash Royale and or like Pokemon Go that you're never really doing a task that takes more than maybe like a few minutes. So you're never able to engage the player in something that's as deep as anything with a console game. It's basically impossible to do really elaborate stories unless you want to, I don't know, like maybe put up stuff on YouTube some other time, but nothing really in game. They kind of just have to make everything around concentrated bursts of fun. So kind of just making the dopamine going a bit, and then of course mobile games kind of have to tend to be a live service because the mobile devices and operating systems just move so much faster than with consoles or computers or anything else really. So most of them also have to be these sort of online experiences where they try to retain the player for basically an infinite amount of time. And it's been shown that for the most part, the best way to do that is to make a reward system that keeps the player engaged even after the baseline game stops becoming fun. So, for example, in Pokemon Go, if you've been playing it a lot since 2016, you probably don't find it very fun anymore to spin the ball and try to catch the Pokemon, right? Because you've caught like thousands or even tens of thousands of them at this point. The only reason you're doing it is maybe to get that XP so you can level up, or Stardust so you can make a different one more powerful, or you're trying to battle a gym so you can get coins to get some cool outfits. So when things get centered towards that, I would definitely argue that they're less. I would just say less good overall. Like it's a less respectable way to spend your time just doing such like a mundane task for such a basic low level kind of reward. But I guess getting back to the main point here, overall I would argue that newer games can be just as good as old ones, and in some senses be better since we have new tech that wasn't always available back then. So for example, in the latest Ratchet and Clank game, they introduced a mechanic where you can hop through portals to all these different environments really, really quickly. And that only works because of the amazing capability that the PS5 has for its super fast storage. And that's a sort of thing that you never could have done on the SNES, right? And then any big open world game where you're exploring such a linear format, and like in Breath of the Wild, you have so many different mechanics at your disposal that you can play with in all these different ways. Again, that's not something they could do back in the day. So I would say, since the console market and just the market for the hardcore gamers is still flourishing and probably doing better than ever, I think most people can attest that this year is just full of great games that are not just full of microtransactions and are big and expansive and tell big stories. I would say you definitely have to think twice before saying that all the old games are better than the newer ones, because I think you can make that case for some, because people can make bad games now, but there's still a lot of good stuff being put out every day. Yeah, that's pretty much my take.
I want to get back to this question with Colin in a second, but there's one thing you said that was interesting. You're talking about mobile games and stuff like that. I was wondering, do you think currently the mobile industry is in gaming is on the rise? With more and more people consuming games via their phones. I was wondering, do you figure that the degradation of mobile game quality is a cause of those creating it, or sort of the culture surrounding it, and that's sort of like almost like what they want, or like they're not like looking for anything better, or is it just like people are looking for things better, but they're not getting anything better, so they settle for what they have?
So I would say probably a mix of it. I can say that Apple and a lot of people, like to hash on their Apple Arcade, but they've really been making a push as of late with their subscription service to put out big games that don't have microtransactions and are pretty much pushing the limits for what a mobile game can do. and it's just honestly not going that well from what I can tell. I'm around a lot of people who play games on their phones, because at school it's a lot harder to lug an Xbox there and hook it up than just play on your phone. And I've had access to Apple Arcade, and what I found is even though they've made some amazing games that are big, just when I'm playing games on my phone, I'm never really looking for an experience like that, nor do I really have the time to really get myself invested in such a big thing. Plus, there's the whole issue of it taking a lot of power. So I would say there's definitely a big role that plays, just where people aren't looking for that sort of thing in mobile games. It just doesn't work as well for the situations, like when you're outside on a bench, kind of hard to, start playing Breath of the Wild there and really get, all the complicated controls underway. I would say, of course, game devs are always they're to blame for some areas and where they try to push the limits of how much they can monetize and keep people engaged without really caring for their health. And there's a really good video I saw from a game developer conference. I think it was called Let's Go Whaling, where a game dev kind of just talks unhinged about the crazy practices they do, and really makes it clear just how unhealthy it can be for people. And he doesn't, really try to tone it down at all. And I think after watching that, it definitely gave me a new perspective on the industry. I wouldn't say it's so bad that, everyone should stay away. And I really like the games that have a focus on the social aspect. I know a lot of Supercell games really try to do that with like the clans in Clash of Clans or in Pokemon Go. They try to get you to like join a raid with friends or gym battle with like other trainers. And I'd say that's definitely a better way to go in that market. You have to be really careful because they research psychological tactics, on what gets people invested and addicted the most. And that's just not something you see people trying to do as much as with console games, because it's just such a different market, really, and it's almost like an entirely different kind of media. I would say I feel like playing a game like I don't know, let's say like a really expensive RPG, so maybe like Persona or some of the Paper Marios. I'd say it's more like watching a movie than playing like a mobile game is. Like it's closer to watching a movie than playing Pokemon Go, if that makes sense. I feel like they're just so different. That's all I got to say, really.
Gotcha. Yeah, interesting takes. Going back to the question of the evolution of video games, how do you feel about it, Colin? Getting worse, better, around the same?
Well, obviously, I feel like I'm going to tread a little bit of the ground Alden has already touched. But I think the short answer is it depends. But okay, to make it a little bit more specific than that, I think whether or not a game or a game type gets better as it is used on more advanced hardware is honestly completely dependent upon a genre and the sort of experience that the genre is trying to sell you. And so he mentioned RPGs, for example, at the end there. That is a great example of a genre which I think most people can agree pretty much gets better as the march of games goes on, because a big part of them is the story, and thus the better you can present that story, the more it's delivering on the promise that the genre is. Like, for example, Final Fantasy VII, the original, is a really beloved game by a lot of people. But like, even so, for so many years, people wanted that remake very badly. Because over time, that game's graphics and ability to convey its story through text and all that simply weakened as RPGs themselves got better and better. So people had a real desire to see those characters and that stories told to them once again in a manner that befits like the love that they had for it in their heads. Obviously, what we got wasn't exactly that, but that's besides the point. But then you have other genres for platformers, for example, where any given platformer can be absolutely timeless as far as its quality. I mean, Super Mario World is still, I think, one of the most iconic platformers ever, partially thanks to modding and such with the Kaizu things, but specifically because the level design and the mechanics that go into that game are so well beloved that a lot of the people who like Super Mario World don't even really need to play the new Mario games because it feels just right. It's like eating a steak. Some people like it at a very specific redness or well-doneness, and old and new games can sometimes just hit that level of redness for people. Another great example of that would be fighting games. People love the old fighting games. People love the new fighting games. People love fighting games that are objectively bad. But it's because we all find a certain beauty in games just based on the mechanics that the developers put into themselves that pretty much transcend the time that they were made. That being said, I do have one major complaint about modern games that does push me a little bit towards seeing the older games with a bit more reverence. And that, of course, is the DLC and games as service models that Alden touched on a little bit. As I've been talking about in my philosophy class, one of the things that makes something beautiful, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, is the idea of integrity, or the idea that something has all of its parts together and it lacks for nothing. And with the advent of DLC and the way that developers are continually trying to capitalize upon it day one, it means games feel less and less complete on launch and therefore in some ways less beautiful. And I think that has a really big impact on the quality of games because there's a big just ship it now, fix it later. And once the vanilla version of a game comes out, it's very rare that a game ever fixes itself into relevancy. No Man's Sky, you are the exception.
No question about that.
Yeah.
One reason, that a lot of companies give as to why things have gotten, how it is with, day one DLC and stuff like that, and broken games and shipment is they sort of point the blame at the consumer and say, well, you're not paying us enough. To make a fully featured game. Video game prices haven't changed up until recently, where we start seeing $70 games, whereas before it's been $60 throughout, despite inflation and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that? And sort of, is it justified? Should they just be making smaller games if they can't make bigger ones? What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, I think this is a much more nuanced discussion than we give it credit for as far as the consumer-developer relationship is here. While I understand that ultimately most people would agree it's the duty of the developer to meet the expectations of the consumer, I do also think gaming has gotten to the point where consumer expectations about what should be in a new game as far as like graphics and content length and such is getting to be quite high and maybe a little bit more than the current budget can handle. But to that, I would definitely argue that the best solution in that case is for each developer team to know their limits, and instead of pushing their game's budgets off to these high and away places and hope that DLC or whatever will help them break even, they should probably try to work within the constraints and make smaller scale games, because there are plenty of games that have come out that are very small scale but have made a huge splash simply because the developers made do with what they had. I can think, for example, of this game I reviewed way back in the day called Celeste. I'm sure some people have heard it, but that's like a small little indie game, and yet it blew up as one of the biggest platformers of that particular year or even the year after. And you didn't need to make these ultra HD graphics to make a good game. And I think a lot of these AAA developers need to learn it's not always about delivering the fanciest. It's about delivering what's best, no matter how much it costs.
Yeah,
that's my thoughts on it anyway.
I'd say that Undertale and Minecraft are definitely also really good examples of things that would seem small, but when you put in just the right mix, even with a small amount of resources, it can really be a big thing. And yeah, I think people tend to overlook that a lot in the corporate world. I'm sure.
Yeah,
If I may add a little bit, one complaint I've always had is that in the gaming world, it doesn't seem as though the relationship between the vendor and the buyer has matured enough where the vendor can be, well, it's not. I'm not assigning blame one way or another. I'm not sure. It's probably complicated, but there's not a good relationship in terms of being honest about how things have to be. So, gaming studios feel the need to, instead of say, okay, we just can't do X because we just don't have the money for it, which is something you can perfectly fine do while you're marketing perfectly well. It's not embarrassing. It's just being honest about your limitations. Plenty of industries do that, and then the audience expectation is then adjusted properly. If that makes sense. So that's one of the thoughts I have there.
Yeah, I think I've said stuff before about. I think did I have an episode on this? I can't remember. At least I considered it on having an episode on small form factor games. I think I did. I don't remember what I said, but my opinions may have changed. But I definitely think a lot of games do more than they need to. Like the buzzword I hate is open world, and I don't have anything. I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with open world games, but I do often feel, I think I remember at the start of the whole mixed media podcast thing, like the first few episodes, I was just railing on Ubisoft for like a few episodes because they're bad. So, and specifically in the fact that I didn't feel like any of their games needed to be open world games. Other than it'd be better if they focused their budget into doing other things. I think, I think part of the problem is like they're spending money on the wrong things. Like, okay, you could spend money on making it open world, or you can spend money on all these other things that I feel are more important, and maybe you sell more copies. I don't know, but obviously I'm not an expert. Ubisoft is a large company, and they managed to do something right, I guess, to get to their size. So maybe I'm just wrong there.
Yeah, I think it's also. I'm sure a lot of devs don't really realize what they're getting into when they go open world. We've seen with how long Breath of the Wild took, and then even its sequel, which is reusing a bunch of assets in the engine and the map. It's been 5 years now, and it's still in the works, and they just had to delay it to last year, so it looks like it's going to be 6 overall. And this is Nintendo. This is like big AAA. I think people they just, it's a very, very hard thing to pull off, and I think we're just seeing some of the effects of people trying to follow trends, and this just happens to be a trend that's not very easy to follow at all, and that's why you see so many flop with it. Because when people try to jump on what's hot, they're not always really looking that much to see how hard it's going to be in the first place. And once they get that far into making a game and their budget kind of runs out, they're left with quite a bit of a quandary. So yeah, I'd say that's one of the reasons that we're seeing pretty mediocre stuff come out, is because people very easily get kind of just distracted with what they're doing, whereas Nintendo, they pretty much do whatever they want at any time. And I would argue they're more consistent with what they put out because of that. Because they're very focused on themselves and doing their own thing rather than just following what's ever in the public psyche at the moment.
Your point about like sort of bad trends that people like to follow, or not necessarily inherently bad, but things that are not always something you should stick to always. Always making an open world game. That's interesting. Can you guys think of any sort of like maybe some good trends that are like something you see in modern games that is relatively new and you're glad it happened and you hope it continues?
One that I do like is replay ability. So we found a lot of games have really been trying hard to include a lot of side quests and a lot of challenges that really help the consumer get the most out of what they've paid for. So a lot of games, if you don't tackle any side quests, they can be really, really short. But I think we've been seeing a lot that in games that really didn't have it before. So like in new Pokemon Snap, they introduced a thing where There's a bunch of quests for getting different shots of Pokemon doing different things, and then there's also like different star ratings for each one, and it really allows the player to get more out of that game than they ever could have before while still enjoying it. And then what's another one? In the latest Kirby, I know there's now challenges in levels where you have to do certain things, like maybe beat a boss without taking any damage, or find all these hidden things in a level, and it gives you a reason instead of just running through a level once and being done with it, to really go back and comb over everything and get the most out of what you've got there. And I think they've been doing a pretty good balance with not making those side quests required for someone who just wants to play through the game and not spend too much time on it. But for people that might have a smaller budget or just like the game more than other people, I feel like I've just been really able to get a lot more value out of my games than I used to back in the day. Not to say that it can't be screwed up a bit. I know Ubisoft is kind of known to add just a ton of stuff to their games that kind of just bloats it out more than people like. But I think across the industry, people have been doing a pretty good job of that overall.
As for me, now I have some fairly mixed feelings on the idea of having game developers focusing too much on online spaces, because one of the things I wrote about in one of my favorite articles that I released a few months ago regarding the purpose of video games, the telos of video games, as we like to say, was that, the part of video games that bring us together, I feel should primarily come from local, like couch co-op and competitive, because ultimately too much emphasis on one's digital relationships can be a bit strenuous and have a real effect on your psyche and your daily life, and even your friendships with the people who are actually close to you. But with that disclaimer out of the way, I would like to give a huge shout out to all of the fighting game developers who have been very adamant about adding the rollback netcode system into their games. I think this whole episode has just been a great show of faith between consumers and developers who want to work through this problem that became super pronounced back in 2020. And I think it's just great to see all of these fans and developers alike getting more excited for new releases over something they've truly been passionate about and have come together to make their genre overall just a better, more accessible place. I think it's been awesome.
For real, I'm not too connected to the fighting community, so I actually didn't know that rollback was being more and more implemented on a wider scale. But that's great to hear. So that's sort of like a
if you ever need someone to talk fighting games, for sure, I'd be a pretty good person to bring back for that. I would especially recommend my brother and fellow writer, The Good Homs, also known as David. He's our big fighting game guy. That guy can write King of Fighters reviews for months. It's hilarious.
He writes like 50% fighting games. It's crazy.
Nice. I guess it's sort of like a specialization within what you guys do.
There's so many.
I tend to be a little bit more varied myself, but I'm also that crazy person who gets kind of a kick out of reviewing super long RPGs too. I really don't have to put myself through it, but I do it because it's a labor of love.
All right, I'm going to switch subjects quite a bit right now. Sure. To something I noticed on your website. I was just going through looking at reviews and stuff like that, and one thing I noticed was there was that one, I guess it's a review about E3. So I don't know if you can call it a review on E3, an E3 review, whatever. It was on the topic of E3, the 2021. I didn't even know when E3 was happening. I forgot that it existed. Something that was sort of in the back of my mind, I guess. I didn't get to read through the entire thing, but I sort of my question is like, we're seeing more things crop up like Steam's like digital festivals and stuff like that, where no one has to be in a given location and stuff like that, and E3 and similar like PAX and stuff like that, they are starting to get their existence is starting to get a bit sketchy, whether how long they'll last due to funding issues. I was wondering what your thoughts are on physical events and how do you think they're better or worse than their digital equivalents? Do you think there's space for them to exist?
So one thing I should probably mention is, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this or not, but E3 for this year was canceled. And of course, COVID is not as big of a deal now as it was last year, but last year they still kind of had it. And, they say that they're preparing for a really big comeback next year. I don't know how true that is. There's been reports, I think at least this past year, that they're just being silent on a lot of fronts. So there's probably some stuff going on that we can't exactly be sure of. I know myself, I really like, having events in person, and it's definitely different than just being online and just watching a video. While it still can be cool, you just can't beat being there in person, maybe trying out all the games hands-on. I think really just the fall of E3, it was probably inevitable anyway, even without COVID. Just with how competitive the market is these days, and how big of a role social media plays in advertising, companies don't really need E3 anymore, and they don't really want to work around it so hard as they used to. And I'm sure it's not fun to spend a ton of work on like this really great game, and then you have it announced at E3, but then there's a game that's just a little bit better, and everyone focuses on that instead. So I think it's unfortunate, but kind of an unavoidable event that would kind of just has to take place with the changing world we're in, and I guess just the competitiveness of the market overall, because we're seeing games really have to try hard to make themselves seen over other ones, since so much stuff is like always coming out now, especially this year. It can be kind of hard for people to keep up with it all, so they really need to carve out a space for themselves as much as they can to get themselves covered in the news as much as possible.
Gotcha. Do you have any thoughts on that, Colin?
Yeah, not too much else really to add there. I think Alden hit on all of the major points. And I mean, I think in particular what he said about developers having to work around E3 was a really good point, because, with those physical events that are scheduled to happen at very specific times, one would sense the idea that game devs feel pressured to get like demo builds or even just vertical slices of their games ready so that they can make some showy trailers or get their demos on the floor and whatnot, which could obviously, I think, hurt a game's development or, rush it to the point where later down the line they have to delay it in order to fix things up. So I think if this new environment creates a space where developers are more allowed to announce games when they're ready to be announced, when their hype cycles are upon them, I think it'll be a much healthier change for it. Although, as someone who's never gotten to go to a big gaming press conference like that, it does sadden me that my chance may be slipping away as time marches forward. But I mean, my real goal is to get to E3 one day anyway, so that's really the one gaming thing I want to do.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
Yeah. The reason why I should have said this before. Oh, sorry. What?
Oh, I just wanted to mention it wasn't E3. It was Evo. That's what I really wanted to get to.
Evo. Yeah.
But yeah, I should have said this before. The reason why I asked the question is because I'm not a game reviewer. At least I guess I have reviewed games on this podcast before, but that's definitely not my main thing for sure. My main thing is game development. So I was interested in a different perspective because, like, as a game developer, E3 isn't really that important for me. I'm more interested in stuff like GDC or like SIGGRAPH and stuff like that. It's cool to see like, oh, these new games are coming out, but given that I don't feel any sort of urge to review them, like there's a lot less. I have a lot less emphasis on finding out what's coming out and sort of looking into new technologies and new strategies. It's very interesting. The more and more I've gotten into game dev, it's like almost like the less and less I care to play games, and the more I care to learn about them, which is and how they're made, which is interesting. A bit counterintuitive, perhaps. All right, we're sort of running out of time. We pretty much ran out of time already. I did not realize that it's been an hour and a half. I'm sorry, Irving and Ben. I gotta steal your time. I literally look at the time like, dang, it's 11 o'clock. So I'm gonna ask some really quick ending questions. Keep them relatively quick answers, and then we can finish this up. So, firstly, do you guys have any sort of will to create games commercially, or are you gonna just stick to reviewing?
Probably not. I would ask Kairos about some of his stuff because he makes again, that's the guy that does most of our website backend, but he makes games on his free time, and I've talked to him about putting them out on the site, just like giving links to them for people to try out because they're all free. I doubt he's going to try to go commercial unless he blows up, and with all due respect, okay, that's a rare thing to happen. So not saying that your games aren't great because they are, but I don't really see that in our future. That's not really something that we're trying really hard to do. But I mean, you never know. Something could happen. Maybe we'll get a smash hit, or someone will join our team who has good skills with making games. I do have contacts with some people who do stuff in the, well, I guess aside from you guys now, who do stuff in the media industry, and I do know one guy who helped work on Fortnite, but I don't think he wants to join the site, unfortunately. But maybe one day something will happen, and yeah, who knows.
What about you, Colin? Any aspirations to join the game dev industry?
Well, I mean, as soon as the studio wants to call me up and say, I want you in the writing room for our story, I'll be there. But until then, I haven't gotten any calls yet.
Gotcha. So not something you're actively pursuing, but
no, it is not. I've got other ambitions.
Gotcha. Understandable. All right, so some rapid fire questions. What are your favorite games?
Mine is it's changed a lot. Mario Kart Wii is probably my favorite for nostalgia. But my favorite overall is, I believe I have it listed on the site as Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Many people think of it to be the best Pokemon game ever made. I would say Legends Arceus might challenge that title just with how much it changed up everything. But yeah, I would list that as my favorite game for now, at least.
My favorite game is The World Ends With You, which is a 2007 DS JRPG by Square Enix. I know it's not a terribly big title, but ever since I played it back when I was in 9th grade, I've always loved that one in particular because it is just a very unique experience, and the story really touched me as someone who was also 15, like the main protagonist. But yeah, I have a review of that on the website if you'd like to check it out. That's The World Ends With You.
I think you have two, right? Because it got remastered recently.
It got a sequel called Neo, The World Ends With You. It's not a remaster, it's a full-on sequel. So that was one of the biggest releases of that particular year. And I had to write a review of it because, it's my favorite game of all time. Got to see what they do to it.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting stuff. Those are not like those are games I have to look into. I'm not familiar with them. On the flip side, what are your least favorite games? The worst games you've ever played?
Dang, that's kind of a hard one. I want to say I don't really end up buying that many games that I don't think are great.
I guess I'm kind of in the similar boat that I haven't really played that many games that I actively despised. But if there is one outlier I can probably put my finger on, it would probably have to be pretty much all like battle royale games, specifically the shooter ones. I know you love your Fortnite, Alden.
I do.
For me, it's just frustrating because you drop into this massive map. You have to scrounge around to even barely get your weapons, and then you sit around for 30 minutes only to get sniped from halfway across the map. It's just so anticlimactic. I can't stand it.
That same feelings, and I always thought I feel like I don't know. To me, it feels like battle royale because you cannot respawn in the matches are so long, and there's a lot of RNG involved with like what you get. I always felt like there was a sort of like a flawed genre in a way, which, yeah, I have played the game and had fun, like various battle royales and had fun, but especially if you're not good at it, it ends in you just running around for like, a good amount of time and then just dying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I do agree that there's definitely kind of a limit that you can't really get past with it, and Fortnite has been trying really, really hard to get over it as much as they can. I think that's probably why they introduced creative mode. But without going on too long of a rant, I'm going to say that least favorite game I've played, Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz for the Wii. They were just trying to kind of do something with the Wiimote back then, and they kind of ruined a franchise that was very, very good on the GameCube. I think the recent remaster they did of the first two games were great, and there were a lot of things good about Blitz. Like, I don't mind the change of art style, like a lot of people did, but they just kind of doubled down on mechanics that I would argue are objectively worse than ways of control that are worse than their predecessors, and it kind of started them on a streak of like, almost like 15 years of just not good games. And yeah, that was kind of sad to see, because I do like those first two games quite a lot, and I enjoyed the remake, although I have not reviewed it at least as of yet.
Okay. And last question, and perhaps the most important question I will ever ask, is this podcast was founded on the idea of bringing hot takes to light in a informative way. So, what is your biggest hot take, your controversial take in the gaming industry, or in art in general? Because this is an art podcast, so it doesn't have to be in the gaming industry, but it could be, obviously.
I don't know how controversial this will be, but I generally don't think the move to having so much stuff online is necessarily a good idea. I should have mentioned this at the start, but I'll be doing cybersecurity engineering in college, and I can definitely tell you, having anything online just makes, it can make things inconsistent and leave you at risk for attacks. And it is just the most annoying thing to me when I am lagging in an online game, or their servers go down, or just I don't have access to stuff, and it can just be a huge pain. And I feel like the Switch is the one console that is still consistently putting out good games that don't need an internet connection, and I am kind of worried about the future, especially with like streaming games and not owning them as much. Very reluctant to try and start doing that stuff, and I really do not like the idea of just paying a fee and streaming a game that I don't really own, that requires another party to make things work right, and all these things can go wrong, and just not a fan at all.
Yeah, we've talked about that kind of stuff before, and I don't think, I'm not a fan either. As there's been definitely a topic of our podcast a few times, is the online only stuff.
Colin?
I don't have very many really broad hot takes, I would say, on the whole. The best hot take I can come up with is very specific. So I assume someone here has got to have heard of Star Wars: The Old Republic. It's the MMO by BioWare, set in the Star Wars universe. And my hot take in that game is there's this particular class that I personally play, the Jedi Consular, and there's 8 classes with different stories. Everyone says that class has the worst story in the game, but I am here to tell you right now that those people do not know what good storytelling looks like, because compared to a lot of the other stories in that game, that one has a lot of really good setup, and it naturally flows between events, whereas a lot of the other stories in that game fall into the problem of getting very video gamey in the way that they're structured. So, SWTOR fandom, your move.
It may have been a very specific hot take, but I'd say it was a good one. It was
very specific.
Yeah.
It's very specific.
And yeah, I think that was definitely all we have time for. Sorry. Well, first I just want to say thank you for coming on. It's the first interview I've done, so that was super cool. And I'm excited to see what you guys have in store for the future. I'll definitely be keeping up with your reviews. And so lastly, would you like to shout out everywhere you can find yourselves? Your website, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatever you got.
Oh yeah. So just our site is CatholicGameReviews.com. Again, it's, just those words. There's no, additions or crazy characters or anything. Our Instagram page is the exact same name. Our Twitter, it's Cath Game Reviews, since we couldn't fit it all in the tag. But yeah, and if you go to our site, you'll find all the links to anything, or you can just search Catholic Game Reviews, and we should be the top if our SEO has been good. I think it has so far, so we should be pretty easy to find. But yeah, that's where you can find us. Catholic Game Reviews is really the most public thing I do on the internet outside of just flitting around on Reddit or being on Discord, which isn't really a good place to follow people. Just go to CatholicGameReviews.com, look up the author piece ribbon, and read all of my articles, please. I would like you to see the evolution of my work. Definitely, yeah. He is a good writer. I'll tell you that. I try. Anyways, thank you so much. I need to be getting to bed, but it has been my utmost pleasure.
Thanks for being here. It really means a lot to us.
Yeah, thanks for being on. 100%.
Always, yeah.
All right. And with that, I guess we'll see y'all later.
See ya. Yep.
Now they're frozen.
Right. Now they're frozen. All right. We have some people who stuck around that whole time, which is pretty awesome. Shout out to 909 Crime, who I know has been commenting throughout this whole thing, which is pretty freaking cool. Shout out to you, and shout out to all the silent fellows who choose not to say anything and also stick around. That's pretty cool too.
Look, tell a man no trouble. I don't want beef, man. I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We pack, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm all righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vipers. No need for the telephone vipers.